Thank you, Hilary, and good afternoon, everybody. I can see quite a few names down the side who I know, so that's lovely. And to those who don't know me, my name's Jan, and I'm Chief Executive of Two Ridings Community Foundation. And a couple of things to say before I start the slideshow. One is apologies. My laptop's probably ancient, so it has a slight buzzy noise. So if you can hear a buzzy noise, it's me, but there's not very much I can do about it, but hopefully you can still hear me. And the presentation is only about 20 minutes, and I do understand they will be shared after the session. So don't worry about trying to write everything down. They will be shared, and hopefully that will leave people time at the end for questions. So I'm now going to try and slickly share screen. So hopefully you can now see my presentation. Can you see that, everybody? Great, I'm seeing Hilary nods, that's great. So that's a little bit about me, about Two Ridings. So what I'm going to cover, I'll say about 20 minutes, what makes a good application to Two Ridings, but hopefully it's generic enough that you will be able to apply to other funders and it will also help you there. I've identified some really tangible things to do and things not to do, and all the things where I say don't do, we have had organisations when they've applied to us do it, so it's all from real life. And then, as I've said, there's time at the end to answer any questions you may have. So just before I start, I'll do a short ad for Two Ridings. We're a community foundation, and what we do is, as in that picture, we work with lots of donors, and we act as the bridge between those donors and the people they want to support, i.e. you. And we try and make that a really positive relationship and process for both the donors and for yourselves. And just another bit more information about us. We normally give away about £1 million a year in grants, and our average grant size was about 3,500. Obviously, last year was a year like no other. Through a lot of networks and connections, we managed to raise £2.5 million for our region for COVID response. And we distributed all of that, most of it last year. And we also did some other grant making. So in total, we distributed £3 million in grants last year to about 400 organisations. And one of the reasons I'm showing this slide is because it has been quite an influential time for us in terms of thinking about our grant making, because we had to get grants out quickly. We made our first award on the 23rd of March, and we managed to turn around grants from application to payment on average around 4 weeks, which is much, much quicker than we would normally do. And one of the things we've done as a result of that experience, in June this year, we introduced a small grants process. And the aim of that is to try and replicate that speedy grant making for smaller grants, so that people could get access to funds as quickly as possible. So Two Ridings, as I say, we've got 40 plus funds. So there isn't one single fund. We're not like the National Lottery where you've got awards for all and reaching communities. We have a number of different funds with different criteria, because some of the funds are geographically specific. Some might be for specific themes or priorities. One thing that is usually consistent across all of our grant making is we do tend to prioritise local organisations operating in North and East Yorkshire with a annual turnover under £500,000. And the reasons for that are that we feel that that's our particular core demographic we want to reach. You know, we feel that they are a particular category of organisations that are very on the ground, very focused on delivery, and very, very effective. We do fund all types of charitable structure, and particularly I wanted to mention that we will fund social enterprises, usually in the CIC structure or governance. But there are some issues with CICs, and what we always do ask, and I really want to emphasise this, do call. If you're a CIC and you see a fund that you think you want to apply to us, do call first, because when we do reject grants, sometimes they're because they're ineligible through our CIC criteria, and we don't want you to apply to be made ineligible. We'd much rather work through with you on a call to either save you time or to help maybe get you over that line. We are working with our donors. One other experience of COVID was that we were predominantly funding core costs, essential costs, as Deb Alcock-Tyler calls it, which is right. And we're shifting towards that as much as we possibly can with donors, but it's a journey. But one thing we are committed to this year and subsequent years is, if it is project funding, we will fund something that's called full cost recovery. Now that's where you get a proportion of your costs of your organisational overheads, staffing, rent, insurance. Even in a project, will fund a proportion of that. And I've already mentioned the small grants process, and that's for under £2,000 grants. So the first thing to stress is to understand your funder, because funders are all different, like organisations are all different, and there is no one size fits all. And one of the examples I've just used is I think 360 Giving should be your best friend, because it's a source of useful information. There's well over 100 funders on there, particularly the national ones. And it gives you a quick understanding of what they want to do. And I just picked BBC Children in Need as an example, and you can go onto 360 Giving and you can get a very quick sense of what they fund. So BBC Children in Need, they made 200 grants in our region in the last few years, mainly sizes of 10,000 to 100,000, and 2 grants programme. Interestingly, they make less awards in the summer. 90% of their grants go to charities and only 4% go to CICs. And they tend to fund across an organised income range, but particularly older organisations, more established organisations. Now, I don't know anything about BBC Children in Need, but that's given me a sense of them. And I think if you go on 360 Giving, you can find out the kinds of things that they fund, what they're trying to achieve, and it gives you that information as a starting point. And also it's useful sometimes if you're delivering, say, like I think Emma's here from SELFA, projects working with children, young people in a rural area, you can use 360 Giving to maybe search on those criteria, and it might produce a funder you'd never heard of, but it might be worth a phone call to them to say, I've seen you fund an organisation similar to me in a different part of the country. Is this something, an application from me, is this something that you'd welcome? And they can only say yes or no, you know, it's not going to hurt. So that's the other thing to say is, and it's really important, and I was on the panel this morning and suggesting that you do get to know your funders, particularly local ones and lottery officers. They're really accessible. Many of you will know people like Ellen and Jenny in our region. It's really getting to know them and always ourselves, you know, in our grants team, there's 3 people particularly you would need to get to know: Roxanne, Catherine and Sarah. And before you apply, I think most funders would welcome a phone call, just because they know better than you about what some of the priorities might be for a grant application, what some of the issues might be, what they're looking for. It's worth doing. The other thing to suggest is always do invite them to events. Keep us informed, because it's lovely to know what's going on, and particularly local funders. You know, you never know what funds are coming up, and if we know about what you're doing, it really does help. The other thing I would recommend you do, particularly the community foundations, sign up to our newsletters. We literally have new funds coming out every month. And so if you visited the website in July, you won't know about funds that are coming up soon. So do sign up to the newsletter. Ours comes out once a month, and we'll always have information on about new funds. And wherever possible, we always try to give people a reasonable timeline from opening to closing, so you can fill in the application. We do, and others do, and particularly now with Zoom, we might do workshops. If you get a chance, if you or colleagues can attend, do attend. It gives you greater insight, and also shows interest. And also, obviously, a bit of a plug for Community First Yorkshire and others. Do talk to them. I think they're more called development officers rather than funding advice workers. Do talk to them because they may well be talking to funders you're interested in. So that's the pre-work you need to do. And then this is a really tricky one, but I think, and I know it's really hard because, you know, full disclosure, 2 ridings applies for grants too. We don't get many grants, but we've had grants from lottery, so we've been in the same boat as you. And I think the principle should be decide what you need funding for and then seek the funder and fund. But I know pragmatically, sometimes people will see a fund opening and think, I think I could got something that I could make fit for that. But that's not always the right way around. But I'm realistic. I understand reality is not always like the principle should be. And I'm sorry if I keep reiterating this, but if you look at the fund and you're not sure, email or call and ask which is the best fit, and do listen and take heed of the advice. In many circumstances, the grants officer's role is to help you get funded. They are often not the ones making the decisions, so they can be very supportive and help you make your best application. That frees them up because they don't feel like they're judge and jury, feel like they're really just trying to help you. So you've decided which fund you're going to apply to. You're ready to start. So here's some do's. And I know you probably have heard this before, and I know you feel like, and I'm the same, you want to start filling in the application form, but do read the guidance notes and do give yourself time to do that, because that's really important, because there'll be stuff in there which might talk about the size of the income that the fund is supporting. Some funders will fund CICs, some funders won't. Some funders, like ourselves, will often have very particular areas of activity. And I was surprised, and I continue to be surprised, when we have a fund and we've said it's for organisations in North and East Yorkshire, and we get applications from Doncaster or from Cambridge or all over. And they fall at the first hurdle, and they've done all that work. So do read the area activity, what it will fund. Is it for revenue? Is it for capital? What the maximum award is. And the maximum award is a fix, because it's not fair. Because if it was a £5,000 application and you thought, oh, I'll give it a go, I'll give it a punt, I'll put in for 7k. The panel is in a really difficult position because you might have made a really good case, but that's unfair because everybody else has adhered to the rules and applied to 5k and under. So you're at risk of having your whole application not considered because of that. There's often, not clues, that sounds like we're trying to make it a game. It's not a game, it's more serious than that. But often in the narrative of the guidelines, it will say about how applications will be prioritised in the event of oversubscription. And that's really important because in our case, for every 10 applications we receive, we fund 6. So that means 4 people will not get funded. So it's a 60% success rate, which is not unreasonable. So, but in the guidance, it might say priority, if in the event of oversubscription, priority will be given to groups that have not been funded before, or have been funded before, or working with most marginalised communities. Read that and think about that. Do check that the budget adds up, and if there's anything you're not sure about in terms of what's needed, again, get in touch and we'll answer any questions. And then this is what not to do, and these are all true, real experiences that I've seen. So, and I know why people do some of these things. I'm not saying well, it just doesn't help your application. Don't cut and paste from another application without checking it first. I've had applications saying, we really want to get funding from 2 ridings, and then further on down it talks about the funding from the lottery will really help us do that. Just do a quick find and replace if you need to. Please don't contact a trustee on the board of the funder. It's not ethical and it doesn't help. Because it doesn't work. Funnily enough, on our community foundations, the trustees aren't the final decision makers on our grants. We tend to have panels. Don't use a lot of jargon. We are generalists. We're not specialists in working with, I don't know, I'll use maybe not a bad example, environmental. You know, if you're talking about environmental issues and using lots of jargon, we won't know what you're talking about. Try and make it in plain English. As I've said, don't apply for more than the maximum award, but don't use the maximum word count if you don't need to. If you can say in 100 words why you need this grant, use 100 words. The grants officers will thank you because they have to read every application. And if you can say clearly why you need the funding in 100 words and there's a space for 250, do not feel you need to use the 250 words. And then the other thing we sometimes see, and we are changing our application form so this doesn't, that you aren't tempted to do this. We might ask questions about the ethnicities of people you're working with. Don't tick every ethnicity if you're not working with every ethnicity. It doesn't help. If you're working with particular ethnicities, tick that. That's really helpful for us. And don't forget to ask if you aren't sure. My colleague said that there's no such thing as a stupid question, only one you wished you had asked. So again, I keep saying this and I can't say it enough. Ask. So you're filling in the application form. We try to advertise when the timeline is, if there's timelines. With the small grants, there is no timeline. You can just apply when you need the full funding. But one of my colleagues did also say, if there's a fund and it's got 2 rounds, what we call the application windows, and one's say in October and one's in May, and you want to apply for something to do over the summer, it's probably better to apply to the one in May, because sometimes if you apply too far in advance, your project may not be seen as higher priority as others who need it straight away. So that's just something to think about. As I say, some funders have open calls, and the BBC Children in Need one, that was an open call. But ask them, ring them up and say, when's a good time to apply? When I looked at that BBC Children in Need one, it looked like the summer they made less grants. Now that might be a really good time to make an application because you've got more of a fighting chance to get funding, or it might not be. So it's worth asking. I would always recommend that you have key bits in draft first in Word. It's much easier to amend and work on in Word than it is in anyone's grant application form. And often, you know, if you're doing a lot of applications, okay, some of the questions might be slightly different, but if you can describe your project in a standard, you've got a Word document with some of your basic data in and some of your basic descriptions of what you do and why you're doing, that means you're not having to write it from scratch every time. Once you're in the application form, keep saving it. You know, just keep pressing save, because our system has been known to go weird and then suddenly the whole application is lost. If that does happen, get in touch with us, because sometimes we can, through the back door, recover that application, but not always. Now, this is something I think is really good practice to do, but I know, again, when people are time pressed, it's not always something you can do. But get a friend who knows nothing about your organisation to read the application. If it makes sense to them, it will do to a grants officer, and they may see things that you're just blind to, or you're writing about something and you're not really explaining what you do. Really be clear about what you do. Often in panels, some of the questions are on, this seems a very expensive piece of activity. Why is the cost per beneficiary? We don't put that statistic in. Sometimes panels will kind of try and work that out when we ask about number of beneficiaries. So if your costs are high, there'll be a reason for it more often than not. Say that. Say you're working with a very specialist small group of people, it's very intensive, it's really important, there's a period of time where people are working one-on-one. That's a really legitimate reason why your costs maybe seem higher than somebody who's getting 20 people in a room to do things. But we're not mind readers. Put the answers to that question in before it gets asked. And if it's for a new project, say why it's new. You know, You're doing this in response to people asking for it. You're doing this in response to an emerging issue in the community. Try and think about the questions that might get asked and try and answer them for us, because that makes the decision-making process much, much easier. We'll all ask for you for various policies, details of governing documents, annual accounts. Make sure you've got them in advance, because there's nothing worse than your deadline is 5 o'clock this afternoon and you're suddenly thinking, where's our annual accounts, and you can't find it. Try and get those together sooner. And if you don't have a policy around something we're asking for, ask whether it's really essential. And we might say, well, we might make a condition of the grant that you get one of those and get that you talk to Community First Yorkshire or whoever. So don't think it's a complete dead end, but do ask. Don't use policies that are what I call boilerplate ones. You know, you can go on NCVO's website and you can download a policy. But if you send us a policy that says safeguarding policy, insert name of organisation here, we know that's not one that's embedded in your organisation, so that would raise questions for us. So don't just use boilerplate ones. Make sure they reflect your organisation. If you've got large reserves, usually over 6 months, explain, you know, say we've got something coming up in the next 12 months, we've been screwing away some reserves for this reason. Explain that, that stops lots of questions. If you've got low reserves, explain why. You know, there are genuine reasons, especially now, why people have got much lower reserves. Say why that is, and that's often going to head things off at the pass before they become an issue. As I've said, if you are a CIC, expect more questions into a number of directors, whether they're paid, whether they're related. There are less safeguards in law around CICs. Therefore, grant makers will require more assurance. It's not because we don't like CICs, we do. We just have to have the safeguards that being registered as a charity almost are implicit within that process. And if there's anything unusual in your last annual accounts, explain why. Again, because you're emptying any questions that might get asked. So after you've pressed submit, what you get with 2 ridings, you probably get with something similar with other organisations. You'll get contacted by an assessor to ask some more questions. Please, please, please do not be afraid of this call. It's really important. We do it to bring your application to life, because we recognise it's really hard to put all that passion and knowledge and insight into 100 words or 200 words. So the assessor is trying to help get your grant application funded. They help bring it to life. It's your chance to have a conversation and say why it is. And often in panels, the assessor's comments are the biggest determinant of whether a grant gets funded or not, because they've actually spoken to you. Grants officers have done their due diligence and checked out your credentials, if you like, but the assessor will say, do you know, I spoke to Mary. It's really clear they know what they're doing. They're really passionate about it. They've got a really good approach to what they're doing. They recognise some challenges, but they're going to do it. That really does help. Just because your chair of trustees is your chair of trustees, if he or she isn't the most passionate and knowledgeable person to do that conversation, don't use them. We don't want to speak to the most important person. We want to speak to the most informed person who can sell your project. And that isn't necessarily always your chair or even your chief exec. Get the person best able to describe what you do and why. And please, for us, don't put this call off. We've got about a window of about a week to turn all these applications into panel papers. And if they're chasing you to do that assessment, they'll start to get steam coming out of their ears and get stressed. And the more time they have as an assessor, the better they'll feel about their application. It won't badly affect you, but do please recognise that we're trying to turn this around as quickly as possible. So your help to make that arrange that assessment call is really good. And the other thing is, and we recognise that often our messages about whether your grant has been successful or not can end up in junk. So please do check your junk mail before you email or call to ask about the progress of the application. And we are going to try and do things to improve that and make that more streamlined, but just please do check when the deadline was before you do call us. So, firstly, sadly, if you were unsuccessful, do ask for feedback, and we are trying to be more honest in our feedback. If it wasn't a poor application, we will say that. We are now starting to gather more analysis data on reasons for unsuccessful applications. Unfortunately, probably the biggest reasons why people are unsuccessful with us is because we didn't have enough funding. We had more good applications than we had funds. So that's the most reason, but we will have people who are ineligible. We do have people who apply and they're just not making a good enough case. We had one the other week. It was a really good project potentially, but they just didn't give enough information. It was very skinny, the application information provided. If you do decide to apply again, which you absolutely can, do make sure you rework the application to take into account of feedback and any new circumstances. But you know, you can resubmit an application. So on the upside, you've been successful. That's fantastic. That's really good. We do try and do end of grant monitoring. We do try and make that proportionate, so we don't want war and peace, but we do want to know what worked, what happened. Do invite us to your project. We do like to visit projects. I was at Site Support Rydale on Monday. It was really great to see the project, and I really got a sense. Lovely to meet Julie, lovely to meet some of the people that benefit from that organisation. And you know, we like to do that. Do send us nice pictures and stories, and do not wait to be asked. If you've had a great event like Julie's on Monday and you took some photos, send them. Because one of the things that community foundations do need is we do need that, because whilst I can talk about what we do, sometimes a picture or a quote from a beneficiary of a project that we funded does really, really help us. Do tell us if something major has happened. Don't wait till the end of grant monitoring. And especially if things like key people leave, you know, chief exec leaves, you know, the chair leaves, or you've had a major grant application, is all really helpful. Please do acknowledge us on our website. We are going to get better about that in terms of providing you with information to put on the website. It does really help us, because we can say to funders and donors, look, you're getting a recognition. And please do the monitoring form. You can't apply to us for another grant if you haven't done this. You know, we do ask that you do provide that monitoring, so do try and get that form completed in the time frame asked for. So currently, there are 2 grants awards now open with 2 ridings. The small grants awards are up to £2,000, and it's open all year round. And there's only 2 questions on that application form. There's a few more tick boxes and things. So that's available for organisations across North and East Yorkshire. And we have the Scarborough District Children and Young People's Fund, grants up to £5,000. That's now open, closes 29th of November. And they're all on our website. But others will open. I know the Selby Fund will be opening in November. We've got other funds due to open every month. So sign up to the newsletter. And thank you. So there you've got, you've got the details of our website. On there's connect to sign up to the newsletter. If you've got generic questions or specific questions, the grants at 2 ridings email address is the best one to use, because that's checked by all the grants team. But you've got my email address there. So I'll stop sharing screen, if I remember how to do that.
Thanks, Jan. That was really informative. I hope people have got lots of hints and tips from that. I don't know if anybody's got any questions. I've certainly got a few. So I'll start with mine while people want to pop theirs either in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, do that and I'll come to you. But just on what you said at the last thing there, can you apply for more than one fund at a time with you? Or if one fund is coming to an end, can you apply for another? How does it work?
You can, but again, I would say if you've already got a grant, I would pick up the phone and check with us, but no, you can apply have more than one grant from us. but just check just in case, because there might be some limitations on that.
Okay, that's great. Has anybody else got a question before I launch into my long list of I won't monopolise.
I'm sure, Hilary, your questions will be nice generic ones that will help fulfill other people.
There are, but do raise your hand if anybody has got a question. Do raise your hand. Okay, Nick, you've got one. Can you take yourself off mute?
That's it. Yeah, got there. Sorry, you have actually just really answered the question, but I just wanted to also thank you, Two Ridings. I'm Nick from Centre for Health and Pastoral Care in Thirsk, and I just wanted to say that we have been really well supported through Two Ridings over the whole COVID period and everything, for which we are very grateful, and it has really made a difference. And you're very welcome to come and visit at any time. But I wanted to ask the question, which was if we can apply for another grant at some point, and I think that's all been answered for us. But thank you very much.
You're welcome, Nick. I would look forward to visiting you.
Thank you.
Lisa was next, then we'll go to Carolyn.
I was just wondering if there's a bit more around the community interest companies, because it seems to be a real tricky one. I'm involved with the dance school, and we're forever trying to apply, and you sort of fall in between the gaps. So I know it said something about the directors.
Yes.
And just, I mean, you know, like it's been a community interest company for 10 years, for example. So I always think after the other seminars, I'm thinking, oh, do we need to change to being a charity? And
not necessarily. And I think, as I said in the presentation, because there's less regulatory framework around a CIC, is one of the reasons why we ask for more information from you. And because we have to make grants that for charitable activity, in theory, the CIC may have a mixture of charitable activity and for-profit activity. And we've got to be really sure we're funding the charitable activity. And one of the checks and balances we look for are unrelated directors, because often CICs might be I am being stereotyping here, might be a couple. They're really passionate. We're not denigrating CICs at all, but we just have to be mindful of it. On our website, and I wish I'll try and find it if I can, and I'll maybe share the link with Hilary. We have a checklist for CICs on our website. Have a look at that, but do pick up the phone, because sometimes it's a quick fix. It might be that we need to ask for 2 unrelated directors and what kinds of limitations you've got around what you do with any profit. And it might be completely answerable. If you have a look at the guidance, which I'll find a link for it and share it, that should give you some support.
Well, thank you very much. That's really helpful. Cheers.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Carolyn, did you have a question? Take yourself off mute. No? Can't hear you. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, forgot that one. All day on mute and suddenly forgotten it. It was, again, a bit like Nick, really, to thank Two Ridings, because I'm from the Trinity Centre in Whitby. And we had some lovely support from Two Ridings. And we're kind of been really working on that. And we are actually at the point when we probably do need to put in more applications and things like that. But you're ever so welcome to visit. We're hoping to open again soon, Jan. I think last time we were only able to offer you the opportunity to kind of follow us around, fully PPE'd, doing meals deliveries, but we're hoping to be able to open again soon. So thank you,
Carolyn. That'd be lovely.
Thank you. Emma, do you want to pose your question?
Yeah, please. So hi, Jan.
Hi, Emma.
Hello. Just also extend next time you're over in Craven, do come and see us. Put the kettle on. But I also wanted to just ask, this may be relevant to other people too. Hopefully it is. I know that with you had funding previously through the tampon tax, which has now been abolished, which is a great thing, but also there were a lot of projects for women and girls which benefited from that. So I think I was the only person who went, oh no, whenever it was abolished.
Yeah, I did too.
So I just wondered, is there any more money going to trickle down from that? Is there any more money left from before the tax was abolished? Do you know? Because you disseminated quite a bit of that, didn't you, Tom?
Yeah. No, unfortunately, there is a little bit left in the government pockets, but I think they've taken a different tack. And I think that's their ability to do that. So I think they've given it to different organisations and not so much around local organisations, unfortunately. But I would like to do more, obviously, in terms of women and girls activity. And someone's asking who will replace the tampon tax fund and what will. Well, the only thing that we can do, and I know other community foundations have done that, is we do some great fundraising for women and girls locally. And that's something that we can do because we do know it's a major issue, in terms of all sorts of for all sorts of reasons. So that's something. And funny enough, I was only talking yesterday about potentially an event on International Women's Day to try and raise some funds for women and girls. So we are keen to keep doing that if we can.
Yeah, great, thank you.
I think now there's a question in the chat while there's a bit of a pause. Someone's saying they had a grant from us in 2019, which not been able to spend because of COVID. We hope to spend it soon. Do we need to keep telling you about plans? Yes, please, just to let us know. Just because in case you suddenly go, if the grant was given for one thing and you it's to do with the other, we just like to have that on our database so that when we send you an end of grant monitoring, we know what it's for. It's not to stop you doing it by any means. It's just to keep us informed, because sometimes it might be, and I'm not saying this in this case, you might want to go, instead of being revenues for capital, and we might not be able to do that. So it's just knowing that. We're not trying to stop you spending it. We just need to know what you're doing. I think Helen's got a hand up.
Yeah, Helen.
Sorry, it took me a while to unmute myself. I'm back again now. Hi, Jan.
Hi, Helen.
I just wanted to say a big thank you, because the grants from Two Ridings have really kept us going over the whole of the pandemic, and we're really grateful.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Helen. Yes, I always cite you, because I think we gave you a grant back in the early days of us as a community foundation. And I think that's the message I always try and give to donors. We're not moving anywhere. We're not leaving North and East Yorkshire, and you're not leaving Whitby. So it's about us working to support organisations like you and Emma and all the others that we've worked with to try and give you more funds to carry on doing what you're doing. So that's lovely. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we're back in business again now, so come and visit anytime.
We will do. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Helen. I haven't got any more questions at the moment, but I've got a list here, so I'm going to keep asking them. Do organisations have to have formal written quotes for project costs, and if so, how many?
Oh, not sure. Sometimes we ask for 2. It can depend. I think I'm not the grants officer. This is where you get the short straw by getting the chief exec, because never let anyone tell you the chief exec knows more about the organisation. It's not true. I'll find that answer out to that specifically for you, but I think usually 2.
Yeah, I'll just go from a development officer's point of view and go, yes, you do. It is quite normal for funders to ask for formal written quotes. So and sometimes it is difficult to get them, and if that is the case, then you just write and say why it is difficult. But usually, certainly the National Lottery will. I know we're not in National Lottery, but they will definitely ask for. But they actually ask for 3. So okay, so no other questions forthcoming. I will carry on. Is it helpful for organisations to provide additional information such as business plans with their applications? Do you know?
Not really. I think we shouldn't be asking all of that. I mean, sometimes if say we have a fund called Step Change, which is about helping an organisation make an improvement so improve their operational efficiency. But usually the kind of funding, our average grant is £4,500. I don't feel we should be asking for business plans. We do ask for a relatively detailed budget, and that's an interesting challenge in itself for some organisations. But I do think one of the things I feel that community foundation funding is sometimes organisations.
Oh, how do I touch my
Sometimes organisations can practice their bigger applications to two ridings.
So, can I just, Jill, you're on. You need to put yourself on mute, Jill. Jill McIntosh.
As in, I can go
put yourself on mute. Okay. Jill, you need to put yourself on mute, please.
You can't do anything, Jill. Jill, I can hear you.
Oh, she can't. Something's gone wrong technically, I think. Sorry, Jan. Sorry to interrupt you there. It was a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was just saying, I think we do ask for quite a lot of budget information, but I think if groups could see it as it's just sharing what you should be doing anyway, having a budget for something, so it shouldn't be an extra. But sometimes I know organisations might need a bit of support around that, and we can provide that support in terms of what a budget template might include. Or again, obviously Community First Yorkshire can provide that support, because the bigger funders and the bigger grants will definitely need budgets, so it's not something to fight shy of.
Thank you very much.
I think Debbie's got a hand up.
Okay.
Hi, Jan.
Hi.
Really just to say thank you again, because we've worked with the two ridings. Revival North Yorkshire has been supported for many years, and I've got to say that the outlook on the grants that you gave was always practical and realistic. You don't look for new projects all the time. You're very realistic in the way that you look at things. The application forms are extremely sensible. You never ask for too much information, but just exactly what you need to know. The team are super efficient during COVID, always, but during COVID, they were extremely speedy, and what you did was essential for us. And above all of that, you're all nice people. So
that's really nice. Thank you, Debbie. We are trying. We do try. Because one of the things I think Ellen in the panel this morning said, grant applicants can sometimes feel like talking to a funder is talking to the head teacher, going to the head teacher's office. And we definitely don't want that kind of relationship. You know, you've got a lot of information you can share with us. We're really keen to learn and get feedback. And I know you've all said really nice things about us, and that is lovely. But equally, I want to hear the things we're not doing right, and don't feel like that's something you can't say and suddenly go, well, I'm never going to fund them again. It doesn't work like that. We want to hear from you what's not working. If the application process is not working, tell us, because we can only get better. We're a learning organisation. We really want to hear from you, and do feel that you can be honest with us, because that kind of, the fact that you can be honest with us, to me, is the best indication of a good relationship.
That's great. It's lovely to have so much positive feedback. That's great. Can you answer how do you pay your grants out? Do you pay up front or when you receive invoices for the work?
No, we always pay up front. We don't like that. I think it's bad grant making. You know, it's wrong, personally. Sometimes we might pay in tranches, depending on the size of the grant or if there's some concern. I'll give an example. We had a concern about an organisation potentially on the risk of going under, but we decided we weren't going to not pay the grant. If we could help, we would help. So we made part of a grant. They did subsequently go under, but that's a different matter. So we might sometimes do it in bits, but that's only for real reasons, which we did explain to you. But no, we pay on. You agree to want the grant, we pay you.
Great. Okay. Got a question in the chat box here from Lisa. Lisa, do you want to ask it in person, or do you want me to read it out?
I know it's perhaps sidetracking a little bit, but sole traders never seem to be able to access, if you're doing community sort of based work, or you know, like, do you have to turn yourself into a community interest company, or it seems like a minefield?
It does, Lisa, and you know, I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool grant maker. I've not done it for forever, and I think currently we wouldn't be able to fund a sole trader, and I do think having to do hoops like become a CIC, sort of, if they get in the way of doing good, I think the onus is on the funders to think about how we can fund sole traders, but always going back to that point I made earlier about CICs. We are governed by charity law, and our grants must be for charitable activity, and we've got to have that confidence and evidence that we're paying for charitable activity.
Would it, like, in just in that, because I know I was involved with the participatory grant making in York, and I've been raving on about it everywhere. Absolutely brilliant.
That's good to hear. I've got Ali next to me at the moment. So
absolute, Ali is a super duper superstar, but I was so blown away with the process that I didn't get round to actually applying, and it's the one thing that I could have applied for. But I think the process was just so good. But I suppose, like, what I'm learning is you have to kind of go along what would a charity have to. The criteria for a charity is really what a sole trader or a community interest company needs to have as a bit of an overbearing guidance.
Yeah.
No,
it's
that
about
makes sense.
making it a level playing field, because a charity have to be registered, the Charity Commission have to have a board of trustees, and the CIC doesn't have to do either of those. The regulatory requirements for CIC are much less onerous. So it's not a level playing field. So we try and put a little bit more checks and balances in with the CIC, just so that it's fair. That's all we're trying to do. We're not doing it because we want to be difficult, or we think it's different. We're just trying to make sure we can have that reassurance that the money's going to charitable activity, and there's some checks and balances. If anything went wrong, we've got some mechanism to manage that situation.
Yeah,
thank you. That's really good, because it helps, like, think as if you are a big charity, even if you're a small thing, to try and use that criteria. Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm just going to come in on community interest companies. They were really originally set up for trading companies. So if in future you're not going to be trading, it's probably not the structure for you. If you've got any queries about how to set up, you know, you've got an idea of a project and you don't quite know what the proper structure would be, do get in touch with Community First Yorkshire, and we can help you with choosing the best structure for your project. Okay, so I don't want people to feel they're high and dry on that one. Carolyn, if you've got...
Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of a small organisation, actually a dance school, or I think Lisa was a dance school as well, a local dance school, and they don't make any profit at all anyway for themselves. Any profits go to charity, but every now and again they will put on a special project and things like that, a very specific charitable project where they get the children in the dance school to be raising money for other charities. But sometimes they need support to get that going. So, for instance, recently they did a performance which raised money for a charity. So presumably, could they apply to you for something like that? It was support for the performance, particularly during COVID, when they knew they wouldn't sell tickets because of so many tickets, or so support with costumes and things.
I think, Carolyn, that's probably a really tricky one to fund. I don't think they would, and but I wouldn't like to be quoted on that. So I think that's a conversation with a grants officer, not me, to work through. And it would probably, I would say, in terms of if a grant program was oversubscribed, that would probably be the one that would not be as high a priority.
Yes, because they're not a CIC, because in a way, one of the things about becoming a CIC is actually that there's that conflict then between the interests of the school and the students and what a board of trustees might begin to dictate for the future, I think. So that's one of the reservations. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah.